Thanks everybody for joining us. We're going to go ahead and give it a start here. We know that there are power outages in our area and internet's coming in and out. So we've been fortunate so far the last couple days that we haven't lost any connection. But if we do, just hang on tight. We'll send you a new link, or we'll figure out some kind of a solution, and we'll maybe redo it if we have to. In the meantime, I want to thank everybody who is either a first responder or who knows someone who is a first responder. We want to make sure that we show our appreciation and gratitude for those folks who are helping all of us so much. Thank you, Roger. I also, let's see, I don't have my screen set up the right way. I think I want to introduce Tony. Tony Taylor is here. He's on our board and he is sponsoring the event. Hi, Tony. There you are. And then I also want to introduce Carissa. It's here. And then I want to introduce Marie. And Marie is our second year AmeriCorps member, and her service term ends in just like 3 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I'm in complete denial. I don't want her to leave. She's just been astounding and amazing. And it was her idea when we had to close for COVID, her idea to bring into a book club, a virtual book club. And so this is the book that we chose for our 3rd month. And oh, here we go. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone can really thank Marie. And if you see her around town or you want to send her an email, just thank her for her 2 years of incredible service. She's huge footsteps. We're not going to be able to fill them. Yeah, oh, you're welcome. And then I'd like to just read something about Kendra before we start in. Kendra Atlee-Work is the recipient of the Ellen Malloy Desert Writers Award and was selected for the Best American Essays, edited by Ariel Levy. She received her MFA in Creative Writing from the University of Minnesota and now lives in Bishop, California. So welcome, Kendra.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Kendra, I was incredibly touched by your storytelling about the Round Fire. It impacted so many of us here. My husband and I thought we were losing our home that night, and you know, the wind shifted and we were saved, but other people weren't. It was an awful, horrible time for our community. And I'm wondering if you could share with us why you chose to start your book with the Round Fire.
So maybe I'll just read a bit from that section as well before I explain, just to give people a little sense. So the book begins with the Round Fire. Here's the book. This is Miracle Country. Got a bristlecone pine on the cover. And actually, my publisher, the graphic designer with my publisher, found that image on her own. I didn't even tell her to use that. So I was really happy when I saw it. So I'm just going to read a little short passage here about the Round Fire. This is a ways into the first chapter of the book. At 7 p.m., 15 members of the Wheeler Crest Volunteer Fire Department drove to the little station in Swall Meadows and changed into structure protection gear, which is heavy and built to withstand heat and smoke. The youngest of the fire crew was in his 40s, the rest past retirement. The volunteers drank some water and left the station. Fire reached over the blacktop and around to their tires. They drove through a river of flame. My father stood in the desert on the outskirts of Bishop. Even from 20 miles away, to look directly at the burning flank of Wheeler Crest hurt his eyes. The gale knocked him to his knees. He watched to make sure the wind didn't turn, because a fire line like this could whip through Bishop and torch everything. His house, the mobile home where my brother lived with his girlfriend and dogs, Great Basin Bakery, the mountaineering stores, the whitewashed Methodist church where a man named Caddy presided every Sunday, and the 2-bedroom house on which I had made a down payment a month before, on Keogh Street, its roof shaded by the long white boughs of liquid amber. But the wind did not turn toward Bishop. It blew up the mountain, tipping bare willows in the direction of Swall Meadows like pointing arms. And as soon as it became clear what would burn tonight, my father got in his truck and drove. He parked at the sheriff's roadblock near the base of the mountains and tried to calculate how high the flames had climbed. The wind blew his hair and pressed his flannel shirt against his shoulders. In the early dark, he could not make out the house of his friends Dan and Linda, who were traveling and had asked him to send news. and he could not make out our redwood house where it sat higher up Wheeler Crest, just below a row of towering Jeffrey pines. What he could see was every tree, everything that could burn, burning. The big spots were houses, glowing longer than trees, black pillars rising from the roofs. The frames lit up as if by X-ray and the windows blazed. Dan and Linda had a natural wood house like ours. Amid darkness and whipping flames, it was impossible to tell one from another, impossible to know what the fire crews might save. What my father heard, the wind shrieking in the bare cottonwoods along the creek that ran up the mountain and into the fire, then voices from the scanners of the officers manning the roadblock, chewed with static, firefighters withdrawing, the community of Swan Meadows fully engulfed. So Miracle Country tells the story of my family's life in the Eastern Sierra. I was born in Bishop and I grew up in Swan Meadows. And when I was 16, my mom died, and suddenly this desert that had been sort of a sanctuary to me all my childhood became empty and bleak, and I abandoned it. I took off. I left for a decade, left my suddenly struggling family and my siblings, who sort of spiraled off into their own trouble. And I went to LA, I went to San Diego, and eventually I went to Minneapolis. And while I was gone, I became more and more homesick, and I started researching the place I'd left behind. And so Miracle Country tells the story of my family here, my departure, what I learned about my home while I was gone, and then eventually my return. So the fire took place in 2015, as many of us know, and that was right in the heart of the California drought. And I was a graduate student in Minnesota at the time. So I took a red-eye flight, flew home, and sifted through the ash with Dan and Linda in the aftermath of the fire when the ground was still warm. And I realized, I watched the community mourn all together. And I think it was then that I realized I was already planning to come home, and I didn't really understand why I felt pulled back to move back to the Eastern Sierra, where it can be hard to make a living. It can be a challenging place to live, and I didn't quite know how I was going to pull it off. And I realized at that fire, when I saw the community really come together to sort of see each other through this climate disaster, that's when I realized that that was what was bringing me back. It was this desire to come back and dig in and really deeply live in a place and really deeply be part of a community. And that's what Miracle Country is about. It's about the story of a place and the story of really finding your home and coming to terms with the darker parts of that home, both in terms of, in my case, my own memories, but also the history that I went into, that I studied to write this book. And kind of deciding to come back and live deeply in a place anyways, and sort of dig in for whatever climate change has to throw at us next.
Wow, thank you. I mean, when I was reading it, first of all, I just want to tell you, I was almost crying when you were reading that about the fire. I mean, I've told people that whoever didn't live here, when they read this, if they weren't here when the fire happened, they should read this book. And for people who were here, there needs to be a trigger warning before they read that first section, because you write about it so powerfully. It's like stepping back into that scary time. It seemed to me when I was reading that the section where you were going through the ashes with Linda, I was wondering, it seemed like it was a metaphor for going through internal something and finding the pieces of your mother. Does that resonate?
Yeah, I never thought about it like that before, but that's one of the things I've loved about having Miracle Country out in the world ever since it got published about a month and a half ago, is readers will share that kind of interpretation with me. And I just love it, because you're totally right. You can totally read it that way, because a lot of the book is me. It's about the Eastern Sierra, and it's about my family, because I can't imagine we would be completely different people if you put us somewhere else. Like if you made me be from somewhere else, I would be a completely different person, unrecognizable to myself. So but a lot of it was, in addition to digging into my home, it was also trying to get to know my mom, because we never got to know each other as adults. We lost out on that adult friendship, and I revisited her. I sort of tried to bring her voice back through this book. So there's a lot of pieces from her letters, memories, her relationship to the Eastern Sierra. She was a teacher in Lee Vining. She was on search and rescue. The second chapter is called Search and Rescue. She gets buried in the snow when they're practicing avalanche rescue. And she and my father both moved to the Eastern Sierra of their own accord, drawn separately to the place for different reasons. And then they met here while he was pumping gas at the little county airport in Bishop and being a hot air balloon pilot, and a bunch of strange jobs to survive. And she was working in education. So it was a matter, writing the book was also a process of sort of finding her so that I could put her in the book.
Yeah, I was going to say, it felt like you were weaving grief and loss with healing that comes from place, from that connection to land. And I was wondering if you could tell a little bit about that.
Yeah, when I was away, so I first needed to leave home because all of a sudden it was the site of all of these memories of my mom, and she was gone and it was too hard for me to be near them. So I left and I went to Los Angeles for college, and then San Diego, and then Minneapolis. But I was so homesick. I would dream about the Eastern Sierra almost every night. And that started turning into a plan for how to come back. And in the book, I sort of wrestle with why I wanted to come back to a place that was so difficult, so kind of full of danger in a lot of ways. I might actually read a little thing about that that sort of speaks to that, that idea of coming back to live beside loss, because in the end it does heal you, and just sort of wanting to be in a place that's complicated and not wanting to run away from things that are hard. So one of the stories in the book is the story of the Camp O'Neill drowning. My mom was principal at Camp O'Neill, and a number of her students and coworkers froze in Convict Lake. And so that story is part of the book, this idea of like living beside danger and living very close to death, and sort of needing to be careful and needing to take care of people in your life and in your community. And that was very tied up with landscape in the lessons that my parents passed down to us. And so I talk a lot about that in Miracle Country. So I want to read just a short section here, A Moment with My Mom, that I think sort of gets at some of that stuff. I was 12, Kayla 10, Anthony 7. We heard the story of the boy's disappearance more than once. It was a part of our history, as intimate as the memory of the birth of 4 kittens in our dark living room one April night. I remember the wooden floor hard beneath my knees and Mom at my side. I wrote in my diary, Susan is having her kittens right now. It's 10:25 p.m. and we are all, including Anthony, woken up, huddled around her box. She's been crying out for some time. She isn't mewing, she's yelling. We see a tail, black, and a little bit of blood. Ice was melting off the mountains and rumbling in the streams. There was spring warmth in night air, the moon new and the sky wet with stars as Mom switched on a lamp, shed light on the prone cat who met our eyes, who must have taken some comfort from the presence of the woman who snipped hairballs from her fur, gathered her in skinny arms, placed a hand on the gray back now while we watched, hushed. In the diary I wrote, then all of a sudden we see feet, blackish pinkish feet with little white nails. She licked him off for a long time. The cat ate the afterbirth and cut the umbilical cord with her teeth. And with me again is the smell of my mother, not of perfume, but of her particular skin, the faint detergent of an old t-shirt printed with wildflowers. She sits on the floor with legs folded, feet calloused, bare nails nipped short. The words she might have said are lost, but what I remember, what I recorded in green pen over many pages, was her desire that we witness, and not only witness, but celebrate, and not only celebrate, but take into the center of ourselves. So I think it's that witnessing that I'm trying to do in writing Miracle Country, the witnessing of both my family story and also the story of this place.
That was so powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Jeez. To go to maybe a little lighter part of it, can you share with us, I'm sure moving to the big cities and living in those other environments had some form of cellular impact on you. Can you tell us more about what those might have been?
Yeah, so I went to college in LA, and most of my friends were local punks. So we played in bands, punk shows together. And in the chapter about Los Angeles that's in Miracle Country, we're running a punk music venue and community center in Inglewood. We had some local friends who lived there, and we gathered up the local high schoolers and said, what do you want? And they said, we want to put on a fashion show. So I recruit my sister, who's trying to be a model in Hollywood at the time. She brings her friends. They wear these like half-stitched clothes that these kids put together and walk a runway that we have. And so I had a great experience in Los Angeles, but it was also very complicated because I was coming from a place that felt Los Angeles had felt predatory to where I was from, but also essential. And so I left not really understanding the story of the water conflict and the water transfer, but having a sense of loss at the level of the land. And in Los Angeles, I kind of expected it to be this enemy, this sort of conquering enemy, but instead what I encountered was a lot of different people having to make daily choices about how they were going to interact with their home place, just like we do here, and mostly being unaware of what was going on in the dynamic between the Eastern Sierra and LA. And so that was, I'm really grateful for the number of years that I spent in Southern California, because I think it helped me understand home better. But I never could get used to the city. I just couldn't adapt to it. I was always ill at ease, even when I was having fun, you know, as a person in my early 20s. I couldn't really get used to cities. I'm in Minneapolis. I always felt like I needed to be here.
I think many of us can resonate with that feeling. I know many of us were drawn back or to this place. I'm sure as an artist, there was some sort of a process that you went through in writing this book. Can you share that with us?
Yeah, so Miracle Country took 6 years to write. The very first scraps of it I actually wrote in a college class. The assignment was to write about grief. So I wrote about being a sort of goth high school student in Mammoth High, traipsing around Swall Meadows. And that was my first attempt to sort of reckon with where I was from and the impact that it had had on me. And some little scraps of that are in Miracle Country, but I worked on it. I went to graduate school for nonfiction writing, and this was my project that I did. And then I worked on it another 3 years after that. So it was a ton of research, a lot of writing that never made it into the book, a ton of revising. The structure was the hardest part. Weaving the research with the family story was the most challenging. A lot of great editors really helped me. I had to cut entire chapters. Like I had a whole Gold Rush chapter that didn't make it in because it was just kind of getting too far afield. So I probably wrote more than 2,000 pages and then gradually trimmed and shuffled them down into these 300. But it was a joy to do. I love revision, and it was really fun. And I got to talk to so many cool people and do so many cool interviews, and learn so much through the process.
Well, just with that, you had to do some research for this book. Was there one bit of new information that you got that was particularly intriguing to you?
Well, I think what sort of shocked and horrified me was what I learned about the displacement of the Paiute people, which I knew had happened, but not in specifics. I had to leave and dig into research to learn about the way that the Army and ranchers together sort of had a systemic attempt at extermination. There was a death march, and then about 1,000 people were marched over the Tehachapi Mountains and abandoned in the desert, and all of this is talked about in Miracle Country, and then survived. The survivors walked back and came back to Owens Valley. And so sort of coming to see the place more clearly as many times swallowed by colonizing forces. I like to think of it as a chain of predation. Actually, it made the way I think about the water now much more complex. And I learned about that through the research, and the details that I learned really helped me understand the story of the place less as as a victim of Los Angeles taking the water, and more as an ongoing chain of people that have chosen how they're going to live in their homes, and sometimes have chosen in ways that have really devastating consequences. And we to this day, we're choosing, the land trust is making that choice about how this land is going to be used and protected for the future. And I think that's really is really kind of at the heart of Miracle Country, is how is our choice as a culture now? What is that going to mean going forward? And we can look at history and see how those choices have been made in a really devastating way, and think about how that bears on our decisions at the moment.
Well, this isn't in my question, some materials that you and I went over earlier. I want to say that after reading your book, I was inspired. I'm currently in a process of taking a 4-week course on the colonization of the US and certainly, you know, the West. And it's, so thank you for inspiring me to go deeper into those layers. I know your pop from his professional life. Like, he spoke at one of our brown bag lunches, and he's a supporter of ESLT. And I'm wondering how he responded to your book.
He was very supportive and very fun to, I did a lot of interviews with my family members, my siblings, and with him. I'm very lucky to have had such a supportive family who basically approved of everything in the book before it got published. And I did hours and hours of conversation with my dad and about his near crashes with his hot air balloon. The time he almost landed the hot air balloon on top of Mammoth Geothermal Plant, which would have been a bad thing. How bad at Miracle Country, among his other adventures, and his child rearing philosophy, which included approaches such as throw them in the pit of a burned house foundation in the meadows out beyond Swall and leave and let them figure out how to get out. He was very fun to write as a character, basically just representing him exactly how he is. Hopefully you agree if you know him. And he's been a great champion of the book and very, very supportive of it.
I bet. I wanted to share too that pre-COVID, I'm in a leadership program that takes me around the country, visiting with other land trusts and working with other leaders of land trusts. And I'm always trying to tell them about the East Side. And I've tried, and I show pictures sometimes, but when I read your book, you just described it so beautifully. I literally ordered from Spellbinder, and they sent out about 12 books to my colleagues, because you just share this place so well, and you put the magic to the landscape, and you also describe it as how harsh it can be as well. Is there something that you wanted people who aren't from here to get from your book?
Yeah, I think, so also thank you for ordering from Spellbinder. Spellbinder has just been such champions. Yeah. My tour got canceled because of COVID, and they were like, oh, we're going to do a distance mass signing in the park, and we're going to do an interview with you for your launch event. And here's a wall of Miracle Country. If you go and spell the Miracle Country wall, which is all my clippings from press, and then literally a wall of my books. So they have been so amazing, and I'm so happy to have such an excellent bookstore here. So yeah, what I want people who aren't from here to take away, well, I hope that our immediate visitors will, get a desire to learn about the Eastern Sierra on a deeper level and still come and enjoy it responsibly and sort of love it deeply like locals do, instead of sort of treating it as a place that they can throw their trash. So I hope it encourages responsible visitorship and also a deep love, because we need advocates all over the country if we're going to keep protecting the Eastern Sierra. So I really hope that it gives them a way to access it as more than just a place to vacation. But as for like people who maybe never will come here, because my publisher is based in North Carolina and New York, and they have no personal relationship with this area, and this is being sold in places where they may never come. So I'll actually read a little thing to answer that question. This is from a review that ran in the San Francisco Chronicle, and I thought that they did a better job than I ever would. Maybe what I want my book to accomplish. So this is by the reviewer in San Francisco Chronicle. And they wrote, "It reminds us to hold our loved ones close, conserve our resources, treat the land as sacred, and stop putting our collective heads in the sand when it comes to climate change. After all," Atlee writes, and then here's a quote from the book, "when the floods and fires begin to overpower infrastructure and disaster response resources, when the world turns strange, when we look around for a figure to lambast on yard signs, who besides ourselves will we find?" And the reference to lambasting a figure on a yard sign is a reference to Mulholland, William Mulholland, the engineer of the Los Angeles Aqueduct, who, when the San Francisco Dam broke in the 30s, he was lambasted on yard signs by Angelenos for that. And I think, and was lambasted in Owens Valley as well, and is still, and that's probably well placed, that criticism. However, we're all kind of in it together, and our actions are also significant and will have significant ripples going forward. And so I think that I want everybody all over the country to think about how they interact with their own homes and how that's going to continue to manifest beyond their own lifetimes.
Oh, beautiful. You know, last night, one of our sessions was about storytelling, and along with the storytelling, people were sharing their special places in the Sierra. What, you know, if there was one place that really meant a lot to them. Is there such a place for you here? It's so hard, I know, but.
It's so hard. I mean, anywhere in the high country, right? When you're just back there. But I guess really personally, I feel, well, Squaw Meadows kind of, there's this one spot on Mountain View Drive in Squaw Meadows that I describe in Miracle Country that's always been important to my family, where you can sit and you can kind of look out, and Wheeler Crest is kind of flying up at your back, and then the whole little neighborhood is below you, and then below that the valley is sweeping down, and then you can see Bishop, and then you can see the White Mountains, and you can see the highway curving around headed to Los Angeles. And it just feels like a very complete picture of all the things that I love, right from that one little spot sitting on the Mountain View Drive.
You write so beautifully. Did writing always come easily to you?
More easily than math. I've always enjoyed language as kind of a material, like the way a carpenter would work with building materials. Language has always been very tangible and has a texture to me. And that's always been something I've enjoyed since really early childhood. I always wanted to be a writer.
Well, your prose is beautiful. It's a gift because it helps you create such a picture that we can step into it and feel it. I'm just wondering, lastly, is there one thing that you hope people take away from reading your book?
Yeah, I'd like them to, I think I'd just like them to think about their own relationship to their home and have that be a deliberate thing instead of an accident.
Oh, beautiful. I think I can't thank you enough, Kendra. Everybody, can we cheer Kendra and give her a hand and maybe come off mute? Yeah. Thanks. Is there anything, we've got a couple minutes, Kendra, is there anything that you'd like to share that we didn't touch on?
Oh no, those were excellent questions, and I just want to say I really appreciate what you guys do. It's really exciting to watch your progress and to hear the news, and I appreciate it. I appreciate your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Well, guys, we're just about at our end. I want to thank everybody for coming, and we'll see you later. We want to thank our sponsors who are part of this tonight. Pupfish Cafe, which is right by Spellbinders too, was a sponsor last night. So hopefully we'll see you at tomorrow's events, and Thursday at 5 o'clock, right, Roger? I got that right for the paddle race this time. Okay. Thanks, guys, so much for joining us. And always, if you've got any questions, feel free to send myself or Carissa emails, and we can pass them on to Kendra. And Kendra, I don't know if you've got the chat box open. Yeah, you do. People are thanking you so much, and it was just beautiful to talk with you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Bye. Have a nice one.
Really